Yeah, hi, I'm Doug Tolman, and I'm here interviewing Robert Dyer, another of the winners from Tuesday night's primary election. Mr. Dyer ran for at-large on the county council on the Republican ticket. Why do you want to be on the council?
Well, I think we've been going the wrong direction. You know, for the last year almost, it's been a primary campaign, and the main issue has been how many Democrats are running. And I think now we can actually start to come to grips with the real issues that I'm running on, which are why don't we have the M83 highway, and why haven't we widened I-270 to help residents in the Up County? Why are schools failing and declining while we're spending more money than ever? And why do we have the lowest rate of business growth in the region? And also, why do we have an archaic liquor monopoly that doesn't let residents buy beer and wine at grocery stores and is also killing our restaurants and bars? So I think we've been going really in the wrong direction on many issues, from planning to transportation to economic development, and that's what I would like to address on the council.
Well, since you bring up M83, how would you address finding the $350 million that needs to be built to build that, and the environmental issues that are involved?
Well, I think the environmental issues are always going to be a question with any transportation project. As far as the financing, my preference is that we follow Governor Hogan's proposal for the express lanes, which would be built largely by private funds, not to the taxpayer. I would also like to cancel the BRT, Bus Rapid Transit proposal, which County Planner Larry Cole estimated would be $10 billion for full build-out. And so that's a lot of money when you're talking about just $350 million. We can take that money by saving on widening 270 and the Beltway with the private funds. Then we have the county funds, as well as diverting that BRT money, that we can build M83, we can modernize the fleet of ride-on and get more buses on the primary routes and so forth. So there's a lot that we can do by deciding to spend on the projects that move the most people for the least money.
Okay. You also mentioned the liquor monopoly. How would you transition the county from its current monopoly into privatization?
Well, I would seek full privatization, and I believe that we can overcome the budgetary issue on that for two reasons. One is that when we had the budget shortfall in FY 2018 that came up in the middle of the year, Ike Leggett proposed $60 million in cuts. I think they made a little bit less than that in cuts, and they said that was all right. We were going to get by with no problem. Well, that's $20 million more than what the liquor department brings in the year. So we seem to do fine with those cuts. And the other issue is that currently there's tremendous amounts of revenue going over to McLean and over to Northwest Washington, where people are going to buy liquor rather than in Montgomery County. So we bring back all of that revenue, and we get we have a stagnant restaurant and bar industry in the county right now. And if we take those restraints of the monopoly off so our restaurants can compete with the district, then we will have more revenue coming in, and I think it'll be certainly more than enough to cover that $30 million that we get in every year from the liquor monopoly.
Okay. How now you're financing your campaign traditionally or with the public
Yes.
election?
Traditional financing.
And every candidate had to make that decision. How did you come to your decision?
Well, I think for two reasons. One is I prefer not to spend the taxpayers' money on my campaign. And secondly, is that when you're running as a Republican, you do have an uphill battle getting funding, I think, as you can see from the results of Republican fundraising. And so it's really not viable for a Republican to say, I will stick to a small public financing donations, because it's really going to count on having a fewer number of donors that might be willing to give more than that $150 amount. So it's just a practical, real problem that traditional financing is the best choice for me.
Okay. So talk about your strategy on getting elected to the council. It's a majority Democratic county, so you have an uphill battle just in the number of voters. How do you turn that into an election victory?
Well, I would say two things about that. One is that you often hear some in the press will say the Democratic primary is tantamount to the election, and that is really not true, because and when they say that, it really acts as a voter suppression tactic, because it makes people feel demoralized. The reality is Republicans can win mathematically in this county, because we have a 3-to-1 disadvantage against Democrats. But in New York City, Rudy Giuliani and Michael Bloomberg won when they had 5-to-1 and 6-to-1 disadvantages. So if they can do it, I can do it. And secondly, I think that much of the anger that drove the term limit vote that was passed, as well as the anger over many of the planning and budget decisions that were made by the council the last 4 years, that anger has been majority Democratic. It's not been Republicans and independents only. And I think when people look and they see Hans Riemer on the ballot, they may want to switch their vote over to me, because he's on the record as approving those decisions in Westbard and the biggest tax increase in history. And when people start to look at as progressive Democrats, and they look at somebody like Hans Riemer and see that they have taken money from Mitt Romney's Bain Capital and Danaher's Mitch Rails, and that Hans Riemer has voted in exchange for campaign donations to open up a $360 million tax shelter for a donor through legislation passed by the council, and he opposes the tenant work group recommendations, which I think any progressive Democrat would support. And certainly if you're a renter in the county, and renters vote, and I think they would like to have those protections of those recommendations, I would be willing to put those into legislation and vote for them. Hans Riemer is not, and he doesn't. Hans Riemer wants to keep the liquor monopoly in place. So these are all issues that I think, as well as his opposition to M83 and fixing 270, people in the up county are angry, people in the down county in Westbard and Littonsville, Chevy Chase, they're all very disappointed that the council and the planning board just do not listen to the residents when they express these concerns about school overcrowding and traffic and green space. So I think motivated voters are going to look at that and say, I think I can take one of those Democratic votes and switch it to Robert Dyer, who's more in line with my positions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dyer. This has been Doug Tallman here with you, and we've been talking with Robert Dyer, one of the winners from Tuesday's primary.